It was about 4 in the morning when I suddenly woke up, and for some reason I couldn't shake this restless feeling. You know that kind of wake up where your mind is telling you something's off, even before you know what it is. I glanced out the window, and that's when I noticed movement in the backyard. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But no, there he was, my son, outside, digging. My heart jumped into my throat, because as a parent, the first thing you feel in a moment like that is worry. Your brain doesn't calmly walk through possibilities. It races straight to the worst case scenario. I stood there frozen for a second, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't just that he was outside at that hour. It was the way he moved. Quick, nervous, looking over his shoulder, like he didn't want anyone to know. And in that instant, I realized something. Sometimes the people you love most carry burdens in silence. Sometimes they bury things, literally or metaphorically, because they don't know how to share the weight. Now, I could have turned away, pretended I didn't see it. But there's this moment in every relationship, especially between a parent and child, where you have to decide, do I step in, even if it's uncomfortable? Or do I let fear of what I might find stop me? That night, I chose to step in, not because I wanted to control him, but because I knew in my gut that if I didn't, something important, maybe even life-changing, would stay hidden underground. And I'll tell you this, that choice, the decision to look closer when everything in you wants to back away, that's the moment where connection begins. Because love isn't about standing at a distance, watching quietly while someone struggles. Love is about showing up even when it's inconvenient, even when it's scary, even when you don't know how it's going to end. When I finally walked outside and saw the dirt on his hands, the sweat on his face, and the fear in his eyes, I understood something crystal clear. Sometimes the scariest discoveries are also the ones that give us a chance to truly show up for the people we love. And that night, I decided I wasn't going to miss my chance. Standing there in the dark, watching my son cover up whatever it was he didn't want me to see, every instinct in me as a parent kicked in. You know that feeling? You want to rush in, grab the shovel, demand an explanation. But something told me to pause. Because here's the truth. When you're a parent, your number one instinct isn't control, it's protection. You want to keep them safe, even when you don't understand what's happening, even when you don't agree with their choices. That tension is what I was feeling in my chest. I didn't know what was under the dirt. It could have been something small, something silly, or it could have been something far more serious. But in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about the object. It was about the message behind the act. Why was he out there at 4 a.m.? Why did he feel he had to hide it from me? Why didn't he feel safe enough to come inside and say, "Hey, I need help"? That's what made my heart ache. Not just the secrecy, but the distance it revealed between us. And here's the part nobody really talks about. When you love someone deeply, whether it's your child, your partner, or even a close friend, you're going to face moments where their choices scare you. It's human nature to want to clamp down, to lecture, to try and control the outcome. But protection doesn't always look like taking over. Sometimes protection looks like staying calm enough to let them know you're there. Sometimes it's resisting that urge to explode so you can actually listen. As I stood there, I had this realization, maybe what he needed most in that moment wasn't my judgment, but my presence. My willingness to lean in instead of pulling away. Because when someone you love is burying something, literally or metaphorically, what they're really doing is carrying a weight they don't know how to set down. And you can't force them to hand it over, but you can be the person standing close enough that when they're ready, they know where to turn. So instead of barging outside and demanding answers, I walked slowly. I softened my face. I let my body language do the talking. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here because I love you. And let me tell you, that's hard. It takes everything in you not to let fear speak louder than love. But if you let fear run the show, you build walls. When you let love lead, you build bridges. What I learned in that moment is this: the instinct to protect isn't about solving everything for someone. It's about showing up in a way that makes it safe for them to stop hiding. And sometimes the greatest act of protection is simply choosing love over fear. When I finally walked closer and saw what he was doing, my stomach tightened. He was bent over, hurriedly pushing dirt back into a hole. His shoulders were tense, his eyes darting, and it was clear whatever he had put in that ground, he didn't want me to see. For a second, my mind raced through possibilities. Was it something dangerous? Something he'd done wrong? Or was it something far more personal? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew this: when someone buries something, it's never just about the thing itself. It's about the story behind it. Think about it. We all bury things, secrets, regrets, mistakes, fears. We dig a hole, shove it down, and cover it up because we believe that if no one sees it, it'll just disappear. But the truth is, buried things don't go away. They sit there under the surface, waiting, pulling on us every day. And sooner or later, the weight of hiding becomes heavier than the weight of whatever it is we're hiding. Watching my son out there in the dark, I wasn't just looking at a kid burying something in the dirt. I was looking at a mirror, because how many times have I done the same thing in my own life? How many times have you? We've all had those moments where we'd rather cover up the truth than face it, where we'd rather carry the secret than risk being judged or misunderstood. His act of burying was physical, but it represented something all of us do internally. And here's the powerful part: uncovering what's hidden doesn't just reveal the object. It reveals the pain, the fear, the shame that made someone hide it in the first place. That's why this moment mattered. It wasn't about finding out what was in the ground. It was about creating the space for him to feel like he didn't have to keep burying things alone. So as I looked at him, dirt on his hands, sweat on his face, fear in his eyes, I realized this wasn't a test of control. It was a test of compassion. Could I see past the act of hiding and look deeper into the human behind it? Could I choose to see not just what he was doing, but why he was doing it? Because that's where real connection begins, not with the surface, but with the story beneath it. And here's what I want you to hear: every secret we bury is really an invitation for understanding, for compassion, for healing. But you only get there if you're willing to dig, not just into the ground, but into the heart of the person who's hiding. That night, I understood something life-changing. Sometimes what's buried in the dirt is nothing compared to what's buried in the soul. As I stood there, my son frozen in the middle of that backyard with the dirt still fresh on his hands, I had a choice to make. Do I come down hard on him, demand answers, let my fear take over and turn this into a confrontation? Or do I take a breath, steady myself, and try to meet him with compassion? That's the fork in the road every one of us faces in moments like this. Because when somebody hides something, our first instinct is usually anger. Why didn't you tell me? How could you keep this from me? What else are you lying about? That's the fear talking. That's the panic talking. And if we lead with that, the only thing we do is push the person we care about even further away. So I stood there breathing, reminding myself that the outcome of this moment wasn't going to be decided by what he buried. It was going to be decided by how I responded. That's when it hit me. Every time life hands you a difficult truth, you have two options. You can attack it, or you can try to understand it. And the difference between the two is everything. Think about the times in your life when you've hidden something. Maybe it was a mistake at work. Maybe it was a secret in a relationship. Maybe it was a part of yourself you didn't feel safe to share. When you finally brought it into the open, what made it possible? Was it someone yelling at you, shaming you? Probably not. What made it possible was someone creating enough safety, enough space that you could risk telling the truth. That's the power of compassion. So instead of firing off 100 questions, I walked closer, slowly, and I softened my voice. I didn't want to fuel the fear he was already carrying. I wanted him to know, without a doubt, that I was more interested in him than in whatever was in the ground. That's not easy. It's a battle between your own fear and your own love. But if you don't win that battle, you lose the chance to actually connect. What I learned that night is this: compassion doesn't mean excusing bad choices, and it doesn't mean ignoring the truth. Compassion means you choose to see the human being before you see the mistake. You choose to value the relationship more than the reaction. And when you do, something powerful happens. You turn confrontation into conversation and secrets into stories that can finally be shared. That moment taught me a lesson I'll never forget. When fear pushes you to judge, choose love instead. Because love is what keeps the door open. When the truth finally started to come out, it hit me that what he had buried wasn't really about the object itself. It was about everything underneath it. The fear of being judged, the shame of making a mistake, the pressure of not knowing how to explain himself. That's when I realized something we all forget. The act of hiding almost always has less to do with the thing and more to do with the story we're telling ourselves about it. See, in his mind, whatever he put in that ground was too heavy to share, too risky, too embarrassing. And isn't that exactly what we do as adults too? We carry around these quiet burdens, these private regrets, and instead of reaching out, instead of admitting we're human, we bury them. Not in the dirt maybe, but in our hearts, in our minds, in our habits. We put them in a place where no one can see, hoping they'll stay down there forever. But they never do. They always surface. That night, watching my son, I understood the buried thing was just the symptom. The real issue was the fear that drove him to hide it in the first place. And that's the deeper lesson. It's never about the secret. It's about the belief that if people really knew us, they wouldn't love us. That belief is what makes us shove the truth underground. So here's the choice we have in those moments. We can focus only on the act of hiding, what was buried, what rule was broken, what mistake was made, or we can zoom out and ask, what pain is behind this? What need is going unmet? What fear is running the show? Because when you see the person instead of just the problem, everything changes. The conversation shifts from blame to understanding, from punishment to growth. And let's be real, that doesn't mean ignoring consequences. It doesn't mean saying, do whatever you want. It means you care enough to look deeper, to say, I see you're struggling, and I care about the why just as much as the what. That's how trust gets built. That's how walls come down. That night, when I finally asked him gently what was going on, the words came slowly, but they came. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't the dirt that mattered. It was the courage it took to finally say the thing out loud. Because once it's spoken, once the truth is brought into the open, the healing begins. And here's what I want you to remember. What's hidden in the dark is never as scary as the story you tell yourself about it. Shine a light, and suddenly you see it for what it really is. In the days that followed, I kept thinking about that night. The backyard, the dirt under his fingernails, the silence that hung heavy between us. It wasn't just a single moment, it was a turning point. Because what really stuck with me wasn't what was buried in the ground. It was the realization that trust, transparency, and growth don't happen in one big, dramatic gesture. They happen in the small, consistent choices we make afterward. That's the thing about relationships, whether it's with your kids, your partner, your friends, or even yourself. Healing doesn't come from one conversation. Transformation doesn't happen because you had one breakthrough. It comes from the way you keep showing up over and over again, proving through your actions that love and trust are safe here. Consistency is what rewrites the story. I started to notice little shifts in him. The way he'd pause before speaking, almost testing the waters to see if I'd judge him. The way his eyes softened just a little when I didn't react with anger, but with curiosity. Every one of those moments was like a brick being laid in a new foundation we were building together. And that's when it hit me, this isn't about one secret being uncovered. It's about building a relationship strong enough that he won't feel like he has to bury the next one. And that doesn't just apply to family. It applies to all of us. Think about your own life for a second. The things you've hidden, the mistakes you've made, the fears you've carried. If you've ever grown past them, if you've ever healed, it wasn't because you flipped a switch. It was because you made a series of small, brave choices to face them again and again until they no longer controlled you. That's the power of consistency. It slowly transforms fear into trust, secrecy into honesty, shame into growth. I realized I couldn't control whether he buried things again. But what I could control was how I showed up every time. I could choose to be consistent in my love, steady in my presence, and patient enough to let the process unfold. And the truth is, that's the only way real transformation happens. Not in the dramatic midnight discoveries, but in the ordinary mornings that follow, when you keep showing up with courage and compassion. That's the beauty of moments like this. They remind us that growth is never about one big choice. It's about the hundreds of small ones that follow. And if you take nothing else from this story, take this: the secret to transformation is consistency. Because consistency turns love into trust, and trust into lasting change.